The Soviet Great Purge era. My name is Sofia Sergeyevich. My father was a Soviet Communist Party soldier who was executed by firing squad for treason in 1934 during the Great Purge. My older brother was a doctor who was also executed by firing squad for treason in 1935. My younger brother worked in a bank but was arrested for treason around the same time as my brother and executed by firing squad. My husband was a senior member of the Soviet Communist Party who was executed by firing squad for treason in 1939. Furthermore, my eldest and second sons were also executed by firing squad for treason the month after my husband's execution. As they were being shot, my brother and husband shouted "Long live Stalin," likely thinking of their families. However, my eldest and second sons were silent. I don't think they understood why they were being shot. They were both still in high school.
Hello everyone. This is the story of the Red Strange. Czech author Franz Kafka died of illness at the young age of 41 in 1924, but he left behind a prolific body of work. One of his most famous works is The Trial. In this work, a bank clerk is suddenly arrested. He has no idea why he's been arrested. No one tells him what crime he may have committed. Nevertheless, the trial proceeds, and he is ultimately sentenced to death and executed. Kafka wrote many works depicting such absurd situations, but in a sense, he may have foreseen events that would later occur in the Soviet Union. His work in the penal colony can also be read as alluding to the return of terrifying political power. Perhaps Kafka even predicted the rise of Hitler. This time, we've created a video about the Soviet era, specifically the Great Purge. Please watch until the end.
In 1917, Lenin established the secret police, which would later become the KGB. He then began to establish a system for identifying and executing counter-revolutionaries. After Lenin's death, Stalin, his successor, pushed ahead with these purges on a large scale. Yagoda was the first to be entrusted with this task. Yagoda was born into a Jewish watchmaker's family and joined the Soviet Communist Party at the age of 15. He demonstrated his skills in the secret police and was promoted to the first head of the KGB. He eradicated the kulaks, whom he considered an obstacle to collectivist farming. Millions of people on the list of kulaks were loaded onto trains and sent to Siberia, where many were executed upon arrival. As a result, agricultural production was devastated, and a great famine occurred in Ukraine and Kazakhstan. The death toll from the eradication of the kulaks and the famine is said to have exceeded 15 million. Yagoda built a thorough intelligence-gathering network, symbolized by the apartment complexes for party officials. Although more luxurious than ordinary homes, these apartments had double walls and secret passageways. KGB agents would sneak in and eavesdrop. At night, residents would hear conversations through the walls, such as, "Let's stop for today and go home." It was an extremely primitive, yet highly effective, method. As a result, these luxurious executive apartments saw frequent turnover, as executives were constantly being arrested and executed. However, around the time of the assassination of Stalin's confidant, Kirov, Stalin began to feel that Yagoda's methods were not up to snuff. He demoted Yagoda and appointed Yzev in his place. In March 1937, Yzev ordered Yagoda to investigate the working conditions of KGB officers in the provinces. As Yagoda and his subordinates were traveling by train to their destination, they were all arrested by KGB agents led by Yzev. Yagoda desperately pleaded for his life, but he was put on trial and executed by firing squad. He was 46 years old. Yzev's father ran a brothel in St. Petersburg. Yzev himself joined the Soviet Communist Party at the age of 22. A small man with a feminine build, he was exceptionally ruthless. He expanded the KGB fourfold and even purged those who were reluctant to do so. From this time on, the culture of snitch before you are snitched upon became deeply rooted in Soviet society. Arrests primarily took place at night, with black cars driving around the city and knocking on apartment doors. It was not uncommon for the head of a household, or even an entire family, to be taken away. Not interfering was the only way to survive. The next morning, long lines formed at the public toilets, only to find families who had disappeared, or whose husbands had been taken away, their eyes red with bloodshot eyes. The following story is told from that time. One night, Stalin was drinking with his entourage. Looking at the stars shining in the sky, one said, "That's Orion," while another said, "That's Cassiopeia." The two began to argue. Stalin then called the observatory and ordered an expert to be brought in. However, the observatory's director was not an astronomer. The previous director had already been executed in the Purges. The director frantically drove to the apartment of one of his subordinate astronomers and knocked loudly on the door. The astronomer inside thought, "This is finally my time," and shot himself in the head with a pistol he had hidden in his desk. The director then drove to his next subordinate's apartment and knocked loudly on the door again. The astronomer, too, became so desperate at the sound of the knocking that he jumped out the window. The third astronomer was finally captured and taken to Stalin, but by then it was already morning, and the starry sky had disappeared. In the midst of these purges, Yezhev promoted the simplification of trials. Trials, which had taken an average of 15 minutes under Yagoda, were reduced to under 10 minutes. As he pushed through the purges, he gradually became more feared than Stalin. However, this was his fatal mistake. Stalin gradually began to dislike Yezhev. Just a year and a half after Yezhev became head of the secret police, Stalin appointed Beria his first aide-de-camp. Both Yezhev and his subordinates knew what this meant. With power now in Beria's hands, Yezhev's fortunes began to decline rapidly. In October 1939, Yezhev was dismissed. One by one, his subordinates were arrested and executed. No one dared to go near Yezhev anymore. He was shunned like a disease. Eventually, he became an alcoholic. Finally, Beria reported to Yezhev that he had been executing innocent people. "Admit it, and I'll spare your life," Beria told him. This was a common tactic within the Soviet Communist Party at the time. In fact, no one was spared. In February 1940, Yezhev was executed. He was 44 years old. Beria was the son of a peasant farmer and joined the Soviet Communist Party at the age of 18. Around 1935, Stalin recognized his work, and in 1939, he was appointed head of the secret police. He temporarily slowed the pace of repression and freed over 100,000 people from labor camps. He also acknowledged that the Great Purge had gone too far. However, the pace of the purges accelerated again in 1940. That same year, Beria successfully assassinated Trotsky. He sent assassins to assassinate Trotsky, who had competed with Stalin for Lenin's succession and was then in exile in Mexico. This greatly pleased Stalin. In June of the same year, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. Beria then focused on executing deserters and cracking down on spies. In 1946, he left his position as head of the secret police, but continued to oversee state security as deputy prime minister. Khrushchev soon emerged as Beria's rival. The power struggle within the Kremlin became fierce. In the 1950s, it became clear that Stalin was plotting to send Beria to the same fate as Yagoda and Yezhev. On March 1, 1953, Stalin collapsed after an all-night dinner with Khrushchev and Beria. Stalin died on March 5, but it is still unclear whether he died of illness or was murdered. On the night of March 1, the guard chief who escorted Stalin to his room told his subordinates, "Stalin says everyone can rest for the night." This surprised everyone. Up until then, they had always kept watch all night, and this was the first time they had been told they could rest that night. The guard chief went home, and the guards slept in the waiting room. The next morning, on the 2nd, Stalin still had not come out of his room. He hated having his peace disturbed, so no one dared to enter his room. In the evening, a guard decided to enter his room under the pretext of bringing some mail and found Stalin collapsed on the floor. His left hand was raised, and he was reportedly urinating, desperately trying to say something. The guards moved him to a bed and quickly contacted his aides. Khrushchev later testified, "When I arrived, I heard that Comrade Stalin was sleeping and had wet himself. I thought it would be rude to approach him at such a time, so I went home." Another guard described Beria's arrival. When Beria saw Stalin sleeping, he said, "Don't disturb him." When I complained that something was wrong, he yelled at me, "Don't disturb Comrade Stalin's peaceful sleep." The next day, Khrushchev and Beria visited again, and it was finally decided to call in a doctor. The medical team discussed treatment at length, and although they suspected a cerebral hemorrhage, they first performed a chest X-ray. Stalin died on March 5th. After Stalin's death, a battle for succession began. Beria, who was the number 2 and controlled the secret police, was considered the favorite, but Khrushchev sided with the military. 3 months after his death, at a Politburo meeting, Khrushchev suddenly accused Beria of having been employed by British intelligence for many years. Shocked, Beria was met with unanimous condemnation, and a motion for his immediate dismissal was passed. Soldiers waiting outside burst in and arrested Beria. He was sentenced to death in an impromptu trial, and despite falling to his knees and crying and begging for his life, he was executed by firing squad. He was 54 years old.
What did you all think? The Soviet Union, the world's first communist state, repeated the tragedies of its history. It is said that approximately 20 million people died in the Great Famine and Purges, and another 20 million in the German-Soviet War. How many millions lost their lives in an absurd world like the one depicted in Kafka's The Trial? While communism held up ideals, it may have been a system that was inherently unrealistic in reality. You can read more about these in Kitten Club. If you're interested, try searching for kittenclub.org. Well, see you in the next video.
Kitten Club invites you into mysterious stories. Click the link in our profile or search kita-stories.com. We look forward to your visit and will provide you with free samples. Please click like and subscribe.